Hi, I'm Kenneth J. Hall. The first question I'm asked here is, how did you get into filmmaking? Well, first of all, I was a huge film fan. From being a toddler, my mother took my brother and I to see movies when we were really far too young. But among those were lots and lots of genre films. Brides of Dracula, Pit and the Pendulum, Gorgo, Mothra, all that sort of thing. And if we didn't really remember it as little kids, later on when we'd see it on television or whatever, the same movie, we would get this incredible sense of deja vu. So anyway, I've always loved movies and so forth. I wanted very early on to get into filmmaking. Of course, it was a lot less accessible back then. You had to shoot at the very least on Super 8 film, which was a very limiting medium. There was really no negative film. You cut your positive, and if you messed up, you basically ruined the film. I did a couple of Super 8 projects. I did a little comedy short called Beauty and the Beast, and it was what if the Beauty and the Beast story had been made by Max Sennett instead of Jean Cocteau. So it was a silly little thing. And then I did another little comedy in an elevator called The Lift about a bunch of disparate types of people, including a gorilla in a business suit. So that was another one. Both were silent. I didn't want to bother with sound back then. So it wasn't until I got to Hollywood in 1982 that I started pursuing real filmmaking. And I started out by writing stuff. I wrote a number of spec scripts. But ultimately, the very first thing, well, actually, I wrote The Tomb, which Fred Olen Ray directed. After that, Fred was mentioning the possibility of producing low budgets, shot on 16 millimeter films for video release, and was looking for somebody to do something. I was hoping to do something original. As it turns out, he had shot a day on a project originally called The Wasp, with Bobby Brzee as the lead and so forth. So basically, I had to look at the footage that he had, along with some other footage that he'd shot separately of John Carradine doing random scenes that he had always intended to plug in to some new film for the simple fact of being able to say, also starring John Carradine. So I wound up with one of these scenes, and between that and the original footage, I had to cobble together a script that tied this footage in together and figure out what else we'd have to do. One of the things that we knew we had to do, and Fred heartily agreed with it, is to let's see, let me start over there. One thing that Fred heartily agreed with is that we had to replace the monster that he had shot. It was basically a bug mask left over from a Tales from the Dark Side episode, or Monsters episode, I can't remember which, that was worn by Bobby wearing, a black turtleneck and slacks, similar to the original Wasp woman, except she was actually shorter than the girl she was killing, and it looked kind of bogus. I had a friend and coworker named Ralph Miller III, who I knew had this spectacular insect head mask, and I suggested that we put some mechanics in it to give it some mandible movement and make an upper body costume. There never was a lower body to it. And Ralph foam fabricated the body part. I gave him some coaching on how to do that, since foam fabrication is one of my specialties. So we created a monster, and then various other friends, Tom Flouts, John Criswell, all these people, my brother Cleve Hall, contributed various creature effects and things to the movie. And for a $30,000 shot on 16 millimeter feature that was done mostly on weekends, all I can say is we finished it. We had more technical problems than I would ever want to go into. And it's not that good, but it's got nudity and effects in it. And, you know, that was kind of what we were hoping for. How long have I been at filmmaking is the next question. Well, you know, I talked about my Super 8 stuff, but as far as Hollywood filmmaking, the film I just talked about, which finally came out as Evil Spawn, by the way, and now I think it's still under Evil Spawn on DVD. Well, that was the first, and I'm trying to think, it was somewhere around 84, 85 maybe. I don't know the exact date. You can look it up on IMDb. But that was back when I guess I started as a professional filmmaker. Of course, I'd had The Tomb, which I wrote, produced before. And then after that, I have a total of a dozen produced screenplays. And, you know, a few films that I directed. I also directed Linnea Quigley's Horror Workout in the later 80s, and that was preceded by a comedy that I wrote and directed in 35 millimeter with a SAG cast called Ghost Rider, which starred the Lander sisters, Jeff Conaway, David Doyle, Tony Francios, and a bunch of other recognizable faces. That, by the way, was the only PG-rated film I'd ever written. Everything else, or directed, everything else was definitely R-rated and more genre-oriented. So, what I've worked on and what I've currently worked on, wow, that's an encompassing question, because during the time I was writing and directing films, I also was working in special makeup effects, and I freelanced there for years. I did, uncredited by the way, a gag for the first Terminator, which was the female commando that gets blown to bits. I made a substitution dummy for her. I worked as a puppeteer on both Batman Returns, helping a group of people operate penguins. I was also one of probably several hundred puppeteers for the New York sequence on Gremlins 2. Let's see. Those were some of the bigger titles that I worked on. Most of the stuff that I had bigger roles in were independent films. Well, I take that back. I did build the octopus prop for Tim Burton's Ed Wood film, and then I did the Carnosaur, the full-size T-Rex for Roger Corman's film. That was definitely independent. So let's see, a lot of big foam fabricated creatures. And then into the 90s, by 1995, I'd started a company called Total Fabrication, which I kept going for 24 years, finally closed it just last year. But I'm still freelancing as an effects artist, and of course, you know, looking to get some scripts of mine produced, still hopefully with me as a director. So I've been at this for a long time. Oh, the last project I worked on was a independent film. After I concluded closing Total Fabrication, I was asked by a friend who's a line producer that could I still participate in this project. And when she told me about it, she said it involves these animatronic creatures coming to life and killing people, and there was also a certain amount of blood and gore. And I thought about it for a few minutes, and I said, sure, I can do this. I set up a space in Roy Kinnearum's Soda Effects shop and gave him the gore effects to do, while I designed and supervised the creature effects, which were very cartoony, starting out as kid-friendly, but have to become sinister as menacing animatronic characters. We did a total of 8 of those in a very short period of time. The movie was shot this past February in outside of Atlanta, Georgia. So we started building these things officially right after Thanksgiving, and we had to ship them to Georgia at the end of January. So very quick turnaround, and the movie is called, well, currently called Willys Wonderland. I know that will change somewhat because the character's name is no longer Wally, it's Willy. But I don't know if it'll be Willys Wonderland or something else. But it hopefully will be ready for a release in October of this year. And it stars Nicolas Cage, who was quite a fun guy to work with. He's a big monster fan. Loves these movies, the older ones, which of course are the ones I grew up with, and it's just a overall cool guy. So that was the latest thing I worked on before this whole quarantine thing hit. But I'm going to go back to making some things, things like characters for children's YouTube channel, possibly some stuff for the Children's Hospital of Orange County. We'll see about that one. But anyway, and then a couple of movies that Roy has asked me to help on, including one thing that sounds fun, a female werewolf movie. So there you go. So anyway, what advice would you give to people wanting to get into the film industry? Well, it was very different when I first started. Basically everything had to be shot on film, usually 35 millimeter, and which cost a certain amount of money that, was hard for people starting out with low or no budgets. But nowadays you can, prove yourself in any number of ways, using, the digital video technology that's now available. And let's face it, everything, pretty much every movie, there's still a few holdouts for 35 millimeter like Christopher Nolan and Quentin Tarantino, but the majority of Hollywood films are being shot on high-end digital situations, and getting access to maybe not the highest end, but something decent, broadcastable and so forth is available now, which wasn't when I was starting out. So, whether you do a music video or a short film and so forth, get it out there, get it exposed. There's lots of festivals, particularly for genre films, out there these days to submit to, and work on your craft, develop your skills, and get some credits, and you don't have to be living here in Hollywood necessarily to do that. As long as you make something good, make something that appeals to people, that people gravitate towards, maybe get some reviews and that sort of thing. There's all sorts of ways. As far as writing goes, that's one of the cheapest things to do. There are these writing format programs, but basically get hold of a script or this great book that I should be getting a commission on, because I probably helped sell hundreds of copies of this over the years. The Cole and Haig book, Standard Guide to Screenplay Format. It doesn't deal with any of the creative writing part. It simply tells you what a script should look like, how to write it, what to capitalize, what to put here, what to put there, and if you can get something like Final Draft or some of these other writing programs, they'll help you with the format. But obviously the main thing, and I've seen a lot of bad scripts, let's face it, is, familiarize yourself by, watching movies and, getting that feel of what is a movie like, how do you structure it, that sort of thing. And that is where the talent comes in, the technical part, especially using that book and, some of these programs, take care of the technical stuff easily. It's, just, write. So, that's about writing, that's about directing and producing and that sort of thing. So that is, the more you get yourself seen out there, I mean, YouTube is a platform that people have springboarded from. So, there's definitely a lot of opportunities out there. You've just got to find them and seize them. And let's see, promote myself. Well, let's see. Even though I no longer have Total Fabrication, I've repurposed my website, totalfab.com. That's totalfab, short for totalfabrication.com. But now I'm calling myself Total Fab Designs. I'm able to work more or less as a freelancer, and still do projects, involving specialty costume, mascots, foam fabrication, that sort of thing. So Total Fab Designs. If you want to look at some of my filmmaking stuff, there is still a website I have called frightfilmfactory.com. Don't say that 3 times too fast. Frightfilmfactory.com, which focuses primarily on the things I wrote, produced, and directed myself, although it's got a complete resume of all the feature films I have worked on as a director, writer, producer, that sort of thing. TotalFab.com has my effects credits, which have not been recently updated on IMDb, so you won't find a lot of my stuff there. But anyway, so those are the main things. Of course, you can find me on Facebook. And I don't know. I think that's basically it. So anyway, TotalFab.com and FrightFilmFactory.com are the 2 places to find me. And there are ways to message me on there. There are contact pages. So those who want to reach out to me and ask me other questions, feel free to do so.